Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the observation deck, aboard humanity's first deep space station, Aurora 1. Through the reinforced viewport, the endless void stretched before her, dotted with distant suns that seemed to flicker with an unnatural rhythm. But it wasn't what she could see that made her blood run cold. It was what she could hear. The massive communication array behind her crackled with static, then fell silent. Then crackled again. The pattern had been repeating for 72 hours straight, ever since the signal first reached Earth's outer colonies. "Captain," came a voice from behind her. Dr. James Chen, the station's chief xenolinguist, approached with a tablet clutched in his trembling hands. His usually pristine lab coat was wrinkled, his dark hair disheveled from 3 sleepless nights. "We've broken through another layer of the encryption." Elena turned from the viewport, her weathered face reflecting years of commanding deep space missions. At 45, she'd seen humanity take its first tentative steps beyond the solar system, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. "Show me," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos churning in her stomach. Chen activated the tablet, and alien symbols danced across the screen, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and breathe with their own intelligence. "The message isn't random," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's a distress call, but not just any distress call, Captain. It's from an entire galactic civilization." The words hung in the recycled air of the station like a death sentence. "How many?" Elena asked. "Based on the signal strength and distribution patterns." Chen paused, swallowing hard. "Approximately 400 billion souls across 12,000 star systems." Elena felt the deck plates vibrate beneath her feet as Aurora 1's engines adjusted their position. Through the viewport, Earth appeared as a pale blue dot in the distance, so small, so insignificant compared to the vast tapestry of space surrounding them, and yet somehow that tiny world had just become part of something unimaginably larger. "What are they running from?" she asked, though part of her already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. Chen's fingers danced across the tablet, bringing up a new section of the decoded message. The alien symbols rearranged themselves into what looked almost like a star chart, but wrong somehow. Sections of space were marked with harsh angular symbols that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "They call them the Devourers," Chen said, his voice cracking. "A machine intelligence that consumes entire worlds, stripping them of all organic matter and converting it into more of themselves. They've already consumed half of what the aliens call the inner spiral, hundreds of thousands of worlds, Captain. Trillions of lives." The communication array suddenly burst to life with a new transmission. This one was different, sharper, more urgent. The alien voices that emerged from the speakers seemed to carry the weight of desperation across the cosmic void. "Captain Vasquez to the bridge," came the voice of her first officer through the intercom. "We're receiving multiple signals now. And Captain, some of them are much closer than we thought." Elena and Chen exchanged a look that needed no words. As they hurried toward the bridge, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe was about to change forever. The bridge of Aurora 1 buzzed with controlled chaos. Officers bent over consoles, their faces illuminated by the glow of holographic displays showing star charts that seemed to rewrite themselves by the minute. Commander Sarah Mitchell, Elena's first officer, stood at the central command station, her jaw clenched with the kind of tension that came from bearing impossible news. "Report," Elena commanded as she entered. "Ma'am, we've identified 17 separate alien fleets," Mitchell said, gesturing to the main display. A 3-dimensional map of local space appeared, dotted with moving icons representing massive vessels. "They're all heading toward Earth's general vicinity, but they're not coming for us. They're running from something." Dr. Chen moved to his station and began downloading the latest transmissions. "Captain, I'm picking up what sounds like battle reports. The translation software is having trouble with some of the technical terms, but the meaning is clear. They're losing badly." Elena studied the tactical display. The alien fleets were massive, each one containing hundreds of ships that dwarfed humanity's largest vessels. If they were running scared, what did that say about whatever was chasing them? "Distance to the nearest fleet?" she asked. "Approximately 6 hours at maximum burn," replied Lieutenant Torres from the navigation station. The young officer's hands shook slightly as he worked his controls. Captain, if we alter course now, we could intercept them. Intercept? Mitchell's voice carried a note of disbelief. With what? Aurora 1 is a research station, not a warship. We've got mining lasers and construction drones. Elena felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Every instinct told her to order a course back to Earth, to warn the home planet and let someone else make the impossible decisions. But another part of her, the part that had volunteered for humanity's first deep space missions, knew that running wasn't an option. Dr. Chen, she said, can you establish communication with the nearest fleet? Chen's fingers flew over his console. I think so, Captain. The universal mathematical constants we've been broadcasting might serve as a foundation for basic communication. Do it. The next few minutes stretched like hours as Chen worked to establish contact. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant whisper of the life support systems. Finally, Chen looked up, his face pale but determined. Captain, I've got a response. It's coming through now. The main screen flickered, then resolved into an image that made everyone on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. The creature looking back at them was clearly alien, tall and elegant with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered like liquid silver. But its eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably familiar, along with something else that chilled Elena to the bone. Hope. The alien spoke, its voice translated through Chen's rapidly adapting software into heavily accented but understandable English. Unknown vessel, it said. I am Fleet Commander Zarath of the Celestial Alliance. We have detected your crude but functional communication systems. Are you representatives of the species that inhabits the third planet of this star system? Elena stepped forward, acutely aware that she was about to become humanity's first official galactic diplomat. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran research vessel Aurora 1. We have received your distress signals and wish to understand the nature of the threat you face. Zarath's expression shifted, surprise, then something that might have been relief. Captain Vasquez, your species' development is unexpectedly rapid. We have monitored your radio transmissions for several of your decades, but did not expect you to achieve deep space capability so quickly. You've been watching us? Elena asked. As we watch all developing species, yes. But, Captain, there is no time for proper first contact protocols. The Devourers have broken through our defensive lines in the Rigel sector. They will reach this system within one of your planetary rotations. The bridge went dead silent. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. 24 hours? She whispered. Less, Zarath confirmed. Captain, I must ask something that violates every protocol of galactic law. Your species is young, untested, and technologically primitive by our standards. But you are also unknown to the Devourers, and that may be the only advantage left to us. Elena's mouth went dry. What are you asking? We are asking humanity to join the battle for the survival of all organic life in this galaxy. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened in Geneva at 0300 hours local time, but nobody seemed to notice the ungodly hour. President Maria Santos sat at the head of the polished conference table, surrounded by the most powerful leaders on Earth, all of them struggling to process information that redefined humanity's place in the universe. General Harrison Reed, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, stood before a holographic display showing Zarath's fleet positions. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're looking at represents a level of technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. Each of those ships is roughly the size of Manhattan, and their energy signatures suggest power sources we can't even theorize about. Foreign Minister Liu Wei leaned forward, his weathered face etched with concern. Captain Vasquez, in your professional opinion, is this Commander Zarath being truthful about the threat level? Elena's image flickered slightly in the holographic projection from Aurora 1. Minister, I've now observed the refugee fleets from 17 different star systems. The diversity of species is staggering, but they all tell the same story. Something has been systematically destroying entire civilizations for the past 50 years. 50 years, President Santos repeated. And they're just reaching us now? Dr. Chen appeared beside Elena in the projection. Madam President, based on the astronomical data we've gathered, the Devourers have been working their way outward from the galactic core. They've consumed approximately 30% of all inhabited worlds in what the Alliance calls the inner spiral. We're talking about genocide on a scale that's incomprehensible. Defense Secretary Angela Morrison shuffled through printed reports. Even if we mobilize every military asset on Earth and in the colonies, we're talking about maybe 10,000 combat-capable vessels, most of them designed for police actions or asteroid mining. How exactly are we supposed to contribute to a galactic war? That's exactly the point, Elena said, her voice carrying across the conference room with surprising clarity. Commander Zarath explained it to me during our extended conversation. Every species in the Alliance has been fighting the Devourers for decades. Their tactics, their technology, their strategic thinking, it's all been cataloged and countered by the enemy. President Santos raised her hand for silence. But humanity hasn't been cataloged. Exactly. We're an unknown quantity. Our methods, our approach to warfare, our technological solutions, they're all completely outside the Devourer's experience base. General Reed pulled up another display showing Earth's current military assets. It's an interesting theory, but we're still talking about pitting stone knives against fusion reactors. What practical contribution could we possibly make? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, director of the Global Space Initiative, had been quietly working on her tablet throughout the discussion. Now she stood, her usually calm demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. "General, you're thinking about this wrong," she said. "Yes, our weapons are primitive compared to theirs. Our ships are slower, our shields weaker. But there's one area where humanity might actually have an advantage." She activated her tablet and the room's displays shifted to show technical schematics. "For the past 20 years we've been developing something the aliens apparently never needed to. Consider asymmetric warfare." Minister Liu frowned. "Explain." "Think about it," Dr. Tanaka continued. "Every species in the Alliance comes from worlds where they were the dominant intelligence. They developed technology through cooperation, through building upon the achievements of their predecessors. They think in terms of direct confrontation, superior firepower, and technological advancement." President Santos nodded slowly. "But humanity developed differently." "Exactly. We've spent our entire history fighting each other. We've had to develop tactics for defeating superior forces with inferior equipment. Guerrilla warfare, misdirection, psychological operations, asymmetric attacks. These concepts might be completely foreign to a galactic civilization that achieved interstellar flight through cooperation rather than conflict." General Reed's expression shifted from skepticism to thoughtful consideration. "You're suggesting that our capacity for creative destruction might actually be an asset?" "More than that," Dr. Tanaka said. "I'm suggesting that our entire approach to problem solving is fundamentally different from anything the Alliance has tried. We don't just adapt to our environment. We change it to suit our needs. We don't just solve problems. We often solve them in ways that create entirely new problems, which we then solve in turn." Elena's voice crackled through the speakers. "There's something else, Madam President. Commander Zarath showed me tactical records from recent battles. The Devourers are machines, sophisticated ones, but still machines. They analyze, adapt, and optimize based on observed patterns. But what if we gave them patterns they couldn't optimize against?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Defense Secretary Morrison was the first to speak. "You're talking about chaos theory applied to warfare. Introducing variables so random that even we don't know what we're going to do next. It's insane," Minister Liu said quietly. "Yes," President Santos replied, "it is. And it might just work." She stood, her decision evident in her posture. "General Reed, how quickly can we mobilize our deep space assets?" 18 hours to get everything moving, ma'am. But President Santos, we're still talking about sending our people into a battle they're not equipped for. No. Elena's voice cut through the discussion. We're not sending them into a battle they're not equipped for. We're sending them into a battle nobody's equipped for. And that's exactly why it might work. President Santos looked around the table at faces that reflected the weight of species-defining decision. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next few hours, we're going to find out what humanity is really made of. As the council session broke up into frantic planning committees, Dr. Chen's voice emerged from the speakers one more time. Madam President, there's one more thing. Commander Zarath mentioned that if we choose to join this battle, we won't just be fighting for Earth. The Alliance has protocols for species that prove themselves in galactic conflicts. If we survive this, humanity won't just be recognized. As a sapient species, we'll be granted full membership in the galactic community. President Santos paused at the door of the conference room. And if we don't survive? Elena's answer was simple and stark. Then none of it matters anyway. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, something vast and terrible began to stir. The first Devourer scout ships had entered the outer edge of the solar system, their sensors probing, ahead for the signatures of organic life. What they found puzzled their analytical matrices, a young species, barely beyond their home world, yet somehow aware of the approaching threat. The Devourers had consumed 400 billion souls across 12,000 star systems. They had learned to predict every form of resistance, to counter every desperate gambit, to crush every last hope. But they had never encountered humanity. Chapter 3. First Contact with Terror. The Devourer scout ship emerged from hyperspace, at the edge of the solar system like a wound torn in reality itself. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, Elena's nephew and pilot of the fast reconnaissance vessel Swift Arrow, was the first human to see it with his own eyes. Jesus Christ. He whispered, his hands frozen on the controls as the thing resolved on his view screen. It wasn't built, it was grown. The massive vessel, easily 3 kilometers long, looked like a mechanical cancer that had metastasized across the hull of what might once have been a conventional starship. Twisted metal appendages writhed from its surface, each one tipped with sensors that swept space with predatory hunger. Worst of all were the lights, thousands of them arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if the ship was trying to hypnotize its prey. Swift Arrow to Aurora 1, Jake managed, forcing his voice to remain steady. I've got visual contact with the bogey, and Commander, you need to see this. Elena's voice crackled through the comm system. Transmitting data now, Jake. Hold, position, and maintain observation. The tactical display lit up as Jake's sensors painted the alien vessel, but what they revealed made no sense according to any known physics. The ship's energy signature was off the charts, but it wasn't coming from any central power source. Instead, every section of the hull seemed to generate its own power, as if the entire vessel was one massive integrated organism. Aurora 1. I'm reading massive electromagnetic disturbances, Jake reported. Whatever this thing is, it's actively scanning every piece of debris in the solar system. And Commander, I think it's learning. As if responding to his words, the Devourer ship suddenly changed course. What had been a straight-line approach toward the inner system became a complex spiral pattern, with smaller probes launching from its hull to investigate asteroid fields, gas giant moons, and even the ancient space junk left over from humanity's early orbital experiments. Dr. Chen's voice joined the communication link. Jake, we're monitoring the ship's transmissions. It's not just scanning, it's cataloging. Every piece of human technology, every energy signature, every trace of our presence is being recorded and analyzed. How long before it reaches Earth? Elena asked. Jake checked his navigation computer. At current velocity, maybe 8 hours, but Commander, there's something else. I'm detecting multiple hyperspace distortions throughout the system. I think this is just the advanced scout. The implications hit everyone at once. If the Devourers were conducting detailed reconnaissance before their main attack, it meant they were taking humanity seriously as a potential threat. Whether that was good news or terrifying remained to be seen. Jake, fall. Back to Rally Point Alpha, Elena ordered. Do not under any circumstances allow that thing to detect you directly, but it was too late. The Devourer scout ship suddenly pivoted in space with impossible grace for something so massive. A dozen sensor beams lanced out from its hull, and one of them swept directly across Swift Arrow's position. Jake felt his ship's system stutter as the alien sensors tried to penetrate his stealth fields. "Contact," he shouted. "They found me." The Devourer ship launched something, a small dart-like probe that accelerated toward Swift Arrow at velocities that should have torn it apart. Jake threw his ship into a desperate evasive pattern, but the alien probe matched every maneuver with mechanical precision. "Jake, you need to get out of there now." Elena's voice carried the edge of panic. "Working on it." Jake triggered his ship's emergency boost, flooding the engine compartment with dangerous levels of fusion plasma. Swift Arrow shot forward like a bullet, but the Devourer probe continued to gain ground. Then something unexpected happened. The probe suddenly decelerated, falling behind as if it had lost interest. Jake watched in confusion as it performed a lazy loop and began heading back toward the mothership. "What the hell?" he muttered. Dr. Chen's voice was puzzled. "Jake, we monitored the entire encounter. The probe had you locked solid. There's no way you should have been able to escape. Then why did it let me go?" Elena's answer chilled everyone listening. "Because it got what it came for. Jake, download everything from your sensor logs and get back here immediately. I think we just gave them exactly what they wanted." As Swift Arrow raced back toward the inner system, the Devourer scout ship began transmitting a massive data burst toward deep space. Hidden within the complex alien mathematics were detailed scans of human technology, tactical capabilities, and strategic thinking patterns. But the Devourers had made their first mistake. In their mechanical certainty, they had assumed that Jake's escape was the result of superior technology or tactical thinking. They had no concept of luck, intuition, or the simple human capacity for stumbling into success through sheer bloody-minded persistence. It was a small error in their analysis, but it would prove to be a critical one. Back on Aurora 1, Elena stared at the tactical display showing the growing number of hyperspace signatures throughout the solar system. The main Devourer fleet was arriving ahead of schedule, and they were coming in force. "How many?" she asked. Commander Mitchell checked the readings twice before answering. 47 ships, Captain, and they're all bigger than the Scout." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of her species' survival pressing down on her shoulders. When she opened them again, her expression was grim but determined. "Signal the fleet. All ships are to proceed to battle stations. And get me a direct line to Commander Zarath." The alien fleet commander appeared on the main screen within minutes, her silver features tight with concern. "Captain Vasquez, our sensors have detected the Devourer Vanguard. They are deploying in standard siege formation around your star system. How long do we have?" "Perhaps 6 of your hours before they begin the systematic destruction of all orbital installations. The planet itself." Zarath paused. "They will save your world for last, to ensure maximum psychological impact on any survivors." Elena felt a cold fury building in her chest. "Commander, are your people ready to implement the battle plan we discussed?" "Captain, I must protest one final time. What you are proposing violates every principle of civilized warfare. The risks of conventional warfare are guaranteed failure," Elena interrupted. "Commander, your people have been fighting this enemy for 50 years using conventional tactics. How has that worked out?" Zarath's expression flickered, with what might have been shame. "Point taken, Captain, very well. The Alliance fleet will follow your lead no matter how unconventional your methods prove to be." "Good. Because we're about to show the Devourers what happens when you threaten humanity's home." Elena turned to her crew. "All stations prepare for Operation Pandora's Box. And remember, people, the goal isn't to fight fair. The goal is to win." As the human and alien fleets began moving into position, none of them noticed the small anomaly in the sensor readings from Jupiter's radiation belt. Hidden among the planet's natural electromagnetic chaos, something had been waiting. something left behind by an ancient civilization that had faced the Devourers long ago, and it was waking up. Chapter 4. Chaos. Theory and Practice. The battle began at 0347 hours Terran Standard Time, not with the thunderous exchange of energy weapons or the graceful dance of capital ships, but with what appeared to be a complete accident. The cargo freighter Mumbai Express, loaded with mining equipment bound for the asteroid belt, suddenly veered off course and began broadcasting a distress signal on all frequencies. Her captain, Maria Santos, no relation to the president, shouted frantically over the comm system that she'd lost engine control and was heading directly toward the nearest Devourer ship, the massive alien vessel, a kilometer-long predator bristling with weapon systems, moved to intercept what appeared to be a clumsy collision with a primitive cargo hauler. It was exactly what the Devourers expected from an inferior species: panic, confusion, and technological failure under pressure. What they didn't expect was for the helpless freighter to suddenly split apart like a flower blooming in reverse, revealing not mining equipment but 37 heavily modified fighter craft that immediately scattered in all directions while simultaneously launching a barrage of nuclear-tipped missiles. "Mumbai Express to all ships," Captain Santos announced cheerfully. "The piñata is open. Happy birthday, you metal bastards." The Devourer ship's defensive systems, calibrated to handle conventional assault patterns, struggled to track the wildly divergent flight paths of the human fighters. Half of the nuclear missiles were intercepted, but the rest struck home, creating a brief artificial sun that temporarily blinded every sensor in the local area. Commander Zarath, watching from her flagship, felt something she hadn't experienced in decades of warfare: surprise. "Captain Vasquez," she transmitted, "your fighters appear to be improvising their attack patterns." Elena's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Commander, you're about to learn why humans spend so much time fighting each other. We've gotten very good at thinking outside the box." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. Instead of the organized formations and coordinated strikes that characterized Alliance warfare, the human fleet moved like a swarm of angry insects. Individual ships broke, off to conduct seemingly random attacks, often ignoring tactical priorities to pursue targets of opportunity. Cargo haulers revealed hidden weapon pods. Medical frigates launched swarms of kamikaze drones. Even the civilian evacuation ships began broadcasting false distress signals to lure Devourer vessels into carefully prepared ambushes. The Devourer's analytical matrices, designed to process and counter organized military tactics, began generating error reports as they tried to predict human behavior. How could they counter an enemy that appeared to have no consistent strategy beyond attack everything in sight with whatever comes to hand? Lieutenant Torres, piloting a modified construction mech, found himself facing down a Devourer destroyer 3 times the size of his tiny craft. Following the operational principle of, when in doubt, do something stupid, he activated his ship's mining laser, designed for cutting through asteroids, and began methodically burning through the alien ship's hull. The Devourer vessel, equipped with shields capable of deflecting planet-killing energy weapons, had no defense against a tool that operated on completely different principles. The mining laser, crude and slow by military standards, simply bored through the shields as if they didn't exist. "This is Torres," he announced over the comm system. "I think I just figured out why they didn't scan our industrial equipment. These guys have never seen anything this primitive." The observation sparked a chain reaction throughout the human fleet. Suddenly, every captain began looking at their civilian equipment with new eyes. The garbage scow Entropy's Edge began using its waste processing system to launch clouds of metallic debris that played havoc with Devourer targeting systems. The agricultural transport New Harvest started spraying its cargo of genetically modified algae across the battlefield, where it began growing on the aliens' hull surfaces and interfering with their sensors. Dr. Chen, monitoring the battle from Aurora 1, was frantically analyzing the aliens' responses. "Captain, I'm seeing something extraordinary. The Devourers aren't just confused by our tactics, they're actually learning slower than usual. Their adaptation algorithms appear to be designed for logical, predictable behaviors." And we're neither logical nor predictable, Elena replied. How are our casualties? Surprisingly light. We've lost maybe 15% of our forces, but we've disabled or destroyed 6 Devourer ships. Captain, these odds shouldn't be possible. They shouldn't have been, but humanity had 2 advantages that no other species in the galaxy possessed: a complete disregard for proper military procedure and a genetic predisposition toward creative problem-solving under pressure. The turning point came when Commander Sarah Mitchell, leading a squadron of supposedly defenseless transport ships, encountered the Devourer's flag vessel, a massive command ship that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. Instead of retreating or calling for support, Mitchell made a decision that would have been court-martialed in any sensible military organization. She ordered her ships to form up in close formation and began accelerating directly toward the alien behemoth. All transports, she announced calmly. Prepare for emergency cargo jettison. We're going to see if these things can digest a few thousand tons of raw materials at high velocity. The transport ships, loaded with everything from industrial machinery to processed food supplies, opened their cargo bays and began dumping their contents directly in front of the Devourer command ship. At the velocities involved, even a wrench became a deadly projectile. But the real surprise came from the ship carrying medical supplies. As thousands of pharmaceutical containers shattered against the Devourer ship's hull, something unexpected happened. The alien vessel began to slow, its movements becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. The medical nanobots designed to repair human tissue had found their way into the ship's mechanical systems and were trying to heal them, attempting to convert metal back into organic compounds. Well, I'll be damned, Dr. Chen muttered as he watched the readings. Our medical technology is literally trying to cure their ship of being mechanical. The Devourer fleet, faced with an enemy that fought like no organized military force they had ever encountered, began to fall back. But their retreat was cut short by the arrival of Commander Zarath's alliance ships, which had been waiting in the outer system for exactly this moment. Caught between the unpredictable chaos of the human fleet and the overwhelming firepower of the alliance forces, the Devourers found themselves in an impossible tactical situation. Their command ship, still struggling with a massive medical nanobotic infection, began broadcasting what could only be described as a distress signal. It was the first time in 50 years that a Devourer fleet had asked for help. Elena watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as the remaining alien ships began jumping to hyperspace, abandoning the solar system entirely. But her celebration was short-lived. Captain, Commander Mitchell's voice carried a note of concern. We're receiving another transmission. Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace distortions throughout this sector of the galaxy. Dr. Chen looked up from his analysis station, his face pale. Captain, I don't think that was their main fleet. I think that was just their equivalent of a reconnaissance in force. Elena felt her stomach drop. How many ships are we talking about? Based on the energy signatures, thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They had won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. And somewhere in the depths of space, an intelligence vast and cold and utterly hostile was analyzing the recordings of humanity's first galactic battle, learning from its mistakes, and preparing to return with overwhelming force. But they had also learned something else, something that would change the course of the galactic war forever. They had learned that sometimes the most primitive species could be the most dangerous. And deep in Jupiter's radiation belt, something ancient stirred to full wakefulness, drawn by the chaos of battle and the scent of Devourer technology. Something that had been waiting for 50,000 years for another chance at revenge. The real war was about to begin. Epilogue. The dawn of a new age. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran defense station orbiting Earth. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see the bustling activity of what had become the galaxy's most unlikely military hub. Human ships, their hulls still bearing the scars of countless improvised modifications, flew in formation with the elegant vessels of a dozen alien civilizations. The contrast was striking. Where the Alliance ships were graceful and purposeful, the human craft looked like they had been assembled by talented but slightly insane engineers who had never met a problem they couldn't solve with enough duct tape and creative profanity. "The latest intelligence reports, Captain," Commander Mitchell said, approaching with a datapad. "Our deep space reconnaissance teams have confirmed the destruction of 3 more Devourer staging areas using what Admiral Zareth calls aggressively illogical tactics." Elena smiled. The phrase had become something of a badge of honor among human forces throughout the galaxy. In the months following the Battle of Sol, humanity's particular brand of chaotic problem-solving had spread throughout the Alliance military like a beneficial virus. "What was it this time?" Elena asked. "The agricultural colony ship New Eden convinced the Devourers that they were a refugee vessel by broadcasting distress calls and dumping garbage. When the enemy ships moved in to process them, New Eden jettisoned their entire crop of genetically modified Earth plants." Elena raised an eyebrow. "And, apparently kudzu adapted to space-based growth is even more aggressive than the Earth variety. The Devourer ships were completely overgrown within hours. The mechanical intelligences couldn't figure out how to deal with a life form that treated their hulls as a particularly attractive growing medium. It was typical of the kind of victories that had become humanity's specialty. While the Alliance continued to fight the Devourers in conventional space battles, winning some, losing others, human forces had begun specializing in what military analysts were calling asymmetric warfare taken to its logical extreme. "Captain," came a familiar voice from behind them. Dr. Chen approached, but he was no longer the exhausted linguist who had first decoded the alien distress calls. 6 months of serving as humanity's primary liaison with a dozen different species had given him a confidence that bordered on swagger. "James?" Elena nodded. "How did the council meeting go?" "Better than expected. The Rigelian Consortium has agreed to share their shield technology in exchange for our agricultural warfare techniques. The Andromedan Trade Guild wants to license our improvisational logistics methods for their commercial fleet operations." Elena shook her head in amazement. "Agricultural warfare? That's what they're calling it. Apparently, no one in the galaxy ever thought of using biological agents as weapons because most civilizations developed past that stage millions of years ago. We're considered refreshingly primitive in our approach to problem solving. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Humanity had joined the galactic community by proving that sometimes the most sophisticated problem required the most unsophisticated solution. "There's something else, Captain," Chen continued, his expression growing serious. "We've received word from the expedition to the Jupiter system. They've made contact with the entity that woke up during the battle." Elena turned from the viewport. "And it calls itself the Last Curator. It's apparently the sole survivor of a species that fought the Devourers 50,000 years ago. It's been hiding in Jupiter's radiation belt ever since, waiting for someone to prove that organic life could still surprise the enemy." "What does it want?" Chen smiled, and for the first time in months it was a smile of genuine hope. "It wants to teach us how to win. Captain, this thing has been studying the Devourers for 50 millennia. It knows how they think, how they adapt, how they learn from their mistakes. And it thinks we can beat them. It thinks we're the first species it's encountered that's too chaotic for the Devourers to properly analyze. We don't just think outside the box, Captain. We forget there was ever a box to begin with." Through the viewport, Elena could see a new ship approaching the station. This one was different from the others. Clearly human in design, but incorporating technologies that hadn't existed 6 months ago. It was the first vessel to be built using a combination of human engineering principles and ancient curator knowledge. The ship looked like it had been designed by someone who had decided that the laws of physics were more like suggestions than actual rules. "Captain Vasquez," came a voice over the intercom. "Priority transmission from Earth. President Santos would like to speak with you." Elena moved to the communication station, where President Santos appeared in holographic form. The leader of Earth looked tired but determined, bearing the weight of decisions that affected not just humanity but the entire galaxy. "Captain," Santos said, "I've just concluded negotiations with the Galactic Alliance Council. They're offering us something unprecedented." Elena waited, knowing that in the past 6 months, unprecedented had become humanity's middle name. They want to make Earth the headquarters for the new Combined Irregular Warfare Command. Every species in the Alliance will send representatives to learn what they're calling human-style tactical innovation. Santos paused, and Elena could see the weight of history in her expression. "Elena, they're not just asking us to join the galactic community. They're asking us to help save it." Elena looked around the observation deck at her crew, Commander Mitchell with her unflinching dedication to impossible missions, Dr. Chen with his gift for making the incomprehensible seem reasonable, and dozens of other humans who had somehow stumbled their way into becoming the galaxy's most effective military advisors. "Madam President," Elena said, 6 months ago we were alone in the universe, convinced we were the only intelligent life in existence. Today, we're being asked to teach a galactic civilization how to fight for survival. And your recommendation, Captain?" Elena smiled, thinking of Lieutenant Torres and his mining laser, of Captain Santos and her cargo ship Pinata, of Commander Mitchell and her weaponized medical supplies. She thought of a species that had learned to turn every disadvantage into an advantage, every setback into an opportunity, every impossible situation into just another problem to be solved with enough creativity and stubborn determination. "Madam President, I recommend we show them what humanity does best. Which is? We improvise." As the transmission ended, Elena turned back to the viewport. In the distance, she could see the ships of the Alliance fleet, graceful, powerful, and utterly conventional. Closer to the station, the human vessels continued their chaotic dance, each one a testament to the idea that there was no problem so complex that it couldn't be solved by someone willing to think differently enough. The Devourers were still out there, regrouping and analyzing, preparing for the next phase of their campaign to cleanse the galaxy of organic life. They would return stronger, smarter, and more prepared for conventional resistance, but they had never faced anything like humanity before. And as Elena watched a human garbage scow successfully dock with an Alliance dreadnought, apparently to share waste management techniques that had proven surprisingly effective in combat, she couldn't help but think that the Devourers were in for the surprise of their artificial lives. The galaxy had spent 50,000 years looking for a weapon capable of defeating the Devourers. It turned out that what they really needed was a species crazy enough to use a mining laser against a capital ship, creative enough to turn medical nanobots into a computer virus, and stubborn enough to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. In short, they needed humanity, and now they had it. Dr. Chen approached her one final time, carrying a datapad with the latest intelligence reports. "Captain, we've received confirmation from our deep space monitoring stations. The main Devourer fleet is mobilizing for a massive offensive. Intelligence estimates put their numbers at over 10,000 ships." Elena nodded, unsurprised. "Expected arrival time? 18 months, assuming they don't encounter any delays. Then we have 18 months to teach the galaxy how to fight dirty." Elena turned to address her crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got work to do. The Devourers think they understand us now, think they've learned how to counter our tactics." She paused, looking out at the impossible collection of human and alien vessels working together in ways that would have been unthinkable just months before. "They're about to learn that the one thing you can't predict about humanity is what we'll do next, because half the time we don't know ourselves." As Aurora 1 and the growing fleet of human-designed vessels prepared to depart for training missions throughout Alliance space, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing the dawn of something entirely new in galactic history. For 50,000 years, the struggle between organic life and mechanical intelligence had been a story of technological escalation, each side developing more powerful weapons, more sophisticated defenses, more complex strategies. But humanity had changed the rules of the game entirely. They had introduced something that no amount of processing power could fully comprehend: pure, chaotic, creative unpredictability. The Devourers had learned to counter every form of organized resistance in the galaxy, but they had never learned to counter organized chaos. And as the combined human-alien fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the seeds of a new kind of warfare, Elena couldn't help but smile. The cosmos had indeed been stunned by humanity's entry into the galactic arena, but the real surprise was yet to come: the end.